The video begins with the text PR Plus presents in pink on a yellow background. In this video, Anahita, a queer disabled feminist, performing artist, and educator, speaks to us about their queer and disabled identity and tells us about their journey of self exploration and discovery.
Hi everyone, my name is Anahita and I am a queer disabled feminist activist, performing artist, educator, amongst a bunch of other things. I'm in my early 30s. I have a long sleeve dark blue t-shirt on and a light blue and white scarf, and I have short light purple hair. My own journey with queerness started very early. I was 11 when I kind of officially came out. But it was always a part of me, and I knew that. And it took a while for me to, I think, really realize what that meant, because I was so young and I didn't have any representation, and I kind of really had to figure it out on my own, which many of us have to do, especially in countries like India, or in many parts of South Asia as well. Identifying as disabled, on the other hand, came very later to me. I think it's only in the last couple of years that I have felt comfortable with it. I think many of us deal with serious imposter syndrome, and I think I didn't allow myself the space to use that word because we're taught, especially those of us who have invisible disabilities, or we're taught kind of that if it's not to a certain degree, then you shouldn't use that word, or that's not really what it is. And a big part of the reason that I felt so scared and didn't allow myself to use that word was because I was constantly being told by doctors, kuch nahi hai, don't make a big deal out of it, it's not that bad, and family members as well, not really understanding the depth of what was happening with my body. So I was constantly being reinforced with this idea that it's not a big deal, and I shouldn't, let alone claim a word that now I feel so at home with, because it finally kind of lets me believe and sit and hold the space for myself that it's true, but even that it was real or that it existed. And I think, unfortunately, many of us also deal with that, being kind of belittled and told that what you're feeling is not actually what you're feeling. A big part of, I think, when my kind of disability started to take form, a big part of what I learned was two things. One was that my sense of self changed drastically, both in my own eyes and both how other people saw me. I think I had to really take the time to understand what it meant, these changes in my body, and how they directly affected the everyday for me, how I interacted with people, what I was able to do, what I felt comfortable doing. And while I was still figuring that out, and I'm still, I think, figuring it out, it was a really hard thing to explain to other people who already had a very clear sense of who they thought I was, or who I had been for such a long time in their eyes. I think one of the biggest things that came up over the first few years, that I think people are not very good at understanding, and when we kind of deal with on an everyday, is how much fatigue there is that we suddenly, need to explain that we're carrying. The fatigue to me was not only about my own body and how much pain I was in, and what that meant in terms of how much rest I needed, but also that the world is not really constructed, and the systems are not constructed to house us in our real selves and in our real bodies and what those bodies need. I think this kind of understanding that a certain amount of productivity means certain kind of worth, how much your output is, how active you can be, that active in a certain way is good. All of these things really are a part of what we are negotiating every day, because we don't necessarily fit the bill in that sense. And I think it took a long time for me personally, and I'm sure this is true for many of us, to be at peace with the fact that I needed rest, and that when I needed rest, my body was asking something of me, and it wasn't that I was being lazy, because we're so often told that that's what it is. And I think doctors, family members, the society at large also wants you to believe that when you're not doing something, or when you choose not to do something, is because you don't want to, you're not interested, or you're lazy. And for many of us, those aren't really the reasons we aren't doing it. Our bodies require certain kind of rest, and unfortunately, with needing that, and because everybody doesn't, it looks like everybody doesn't really need that, right? Around us, we're not really shown that part. There's an immense sense of guilt that we also carry because we are always in need of a little more time or something slightly different. And I think with that, like for me, when my disability first began, I was in college and I had to take a year off. I had to take a medical year. And I came back home for that year. And I found myself incredibly unanchored because it was so new and it had come at a time where I felt like I was finally doing what I loved. I was away from home. I was living this independent young adult life. And then something switched that I felt like I didn't have control over. And that felt so new inside me that it felt like it couldn't be me. There's an interesting, I think, pull there between what feels like it's lives inside you, especially when you're first meeting it and it's first taking form. And I think it was crazy because I came home and that I took a year where basically I was doing just doctor visits and I was flat on my back for the most part. And it was during that year that I think I learned a lot about myself, but also lost a lot in some ways because I was in a long term relationship at the time, and it was during this time that she and I broke up because I was so depressed and so unanchored and so confused that I not only was a different person than who she started dating originally, but I couldn't really give back what she needed from me. And I barely knew what I needed myself. And I think many of us, as we go into new relationships after something has shifted, and not just with the body, but also with the body, we're negotiating kind of who we are and therefore who we are in a partnership of any kind. And I think this is something we don't really get taught. We don't really know how to deal with, and we have to deal with it ourselves. Something that I think looking back would have really helped me, and I wonder how many of you kind of also feel like this is something you've either gotten and it's helped you or you haven't gotten, is if I had been actually given the resources that I needed, if I had been given the opportunity to meet with mental health professionals who could have supported me through that kind of shift, through what I was going through, and something as simple as getting more understanding and being believed by the people close to me at a time when so much was changing and when so much was being felt. I think something as simple as understanding often goes a really long way.
This video ends with two logos on a yellow background. The first one is a pink heart and a plus sign and has PR plus written underneath, and the second one is a green and black eye and has point of view written next to it.